What's up guys, Jared here, back with our second Wisecrack vlog. We recently covered the newest Black Mirror episode Bandersnatch on our movie podcast Show Me the Meaning, and as you might guess from Black Mirror, it prompted a pretty interesting discussion. Now, you might have noticed that Netflix's inaugural attempt at interactivity plays with the ideas of determinism and free will, but what I find most interesting is how it reflects on how choice affects storytelling. So let's dive into the most meta thing ever in this Wisecrack vlog on Bandersnatch. And of course, spoilers ahead for all paths. But first, a quick recap, as hard as that may sound. Bandersnatch follows talented 80s game developer Stefan Butler. Stefan is offered the deal of his dreams when he's invited to finish his computer game Bandersnatch at the company that produces his favorite titles. But he denies the offer in favor of finishing the game alone and letting the company market and sell it.
Good thing I doubled on the advertising.
With his deadline looming and the complexity of adapting the infamous Bandersnatch book into game form weighing on him, he finds himself deep in the hole. His father ushers him to a therapist who helps him work through a childhood trauma that ended in his mother's death. In another path, Stefan's idol Colin guides him through an LSD trip and tells him that reality is like a game, and in this game, death is meaningless.
How many times have you watched Pac-Man die? Doesn't bother him.
Stefan becomes increasingly convinced that he is not in control of his actions. You, the viewer, can decide the force that's pulling his string. It can be you, a Netflix viewer.
What the is Netflix?
Or a government experiment gone wrong, or the Pax demon from the book, or a cosmic deterministic force that drove the enigmatic Bandersnatch author to kill his wife. Stefan, too, can kill his dad, his boss, or Colin, or seek solace in his therapist. All these choices lead to some form of the game being released, with the reviews dependent on your choices. The thing that really animates the ideas in this episode is the concept of Ludo Narrativity. Ludo Narrative is the combination of the word ludology, the study of game design, with narrative, and you all know what that means. Ludo Narrativity, therefore, is how a game's mechanics interact with and affect the narrative. And if you haven't noticed, Bandersnatch, the Black Mirror episode, has identical mechanics to old school video games like Stefan's Bandersnatch. So I think this meta element is meant to point to the fact that despite this being a TV show with actors, we are undoubtedly playing a game. If we understand how the game mechanics of Bandersnatch work in conjunction with, or in contrast to the narrative, we can understand the real promise of this kind of storytelling. There's a very important distinction between identifying with a character's decisions and actually making them. And this episode illustrates how these decisions can simultaneously bring us closer to a character and distance ourselves from them. Now, I know that sounds confusing, so just stay with me. One perspective on the matter is that when you guide the choices of the protagonist, you greater empathize with them. So you would avoid actions that screw up Stefan's life, like pouring tea on his computer or killing his dad. In fact, you might even start referring to the character as I when making these choices. But since this is a choose-your-own-adventure narrative about choose-your-own-adventure narratives, the developments of the plot reveal how such game mechanics can actually distance us from the protagonist. In games in general, you could just be a sadist who wants to do harm to just see what happens. Think elaborately torturing your Sims. They're not objects of empathy, but just playthings. But games can also intentionally accentuate this distance, such is the case with Black Mirror. When Stefan calls for the force controlling him to reveal his or herself,
Come on, if there's someone there, just give me a sign. Will you give me a sign?
the episode reminds us that we are not the protagonist. We are a separate force controlling him. Presenting choice to an audience in a narrative will always create an invisible puppet master that is controlling the character's choices. Us.
Oh God, really?
We are not Stefan. We are his masters. This is a game. But it's the nature of death, or an end, that really makes this different from traditional storytelling. This is best encapsulated by Colin when he tells Stefan that he might as well just jump off the balcony to his death because, just like Pac-Man, death just means starting over. If you jump to your death, you do just that. The show prompts you with a choice to go back to a checkpoint and you just try again. Normally in TV or film, we can be blackmailed into caring about the emotional stakes of the story, whether it be through performance, music, close-ups, whatever this bullshit is. But the very mechanics of games often destroy those emotional stakes. Death is usually followed by a respawn or a reload. In other words, it doesn't matter. As a choose-your-own-adventure filmmaker, this presents two possibilities. The ludic element, the gameplay, can either supplement the goals of the narrative or subvert them. When the gameplay and the narrative work in concert, we call that Ludo Narrative consonance. Like if the gameplay gives you limited choices, providing the illusion of free will, which is also reflected in the narrative.
Now they've only got the illusion of free will, but really, I decide the ending.
Now, that's great, but there's also a danger in that gameplay and narrative may clash, i.e. Ludo Narrative Dissonance. And if the gameplay elements make death meaningless and the narrative wants you to care about death, we would call it Ludo Narrative Dissonance. What does it mean that you can go back in time and join your mother on an ill-fated train ride, especially when you just get to reload and try the other endings? And at what point do we stop caring about Stefan's well-being and just want to see all the different options? But to Colin's point, death doesn't matter in games. When Spider-Man dissolves away at the end of Infinity War, we might weep because we feel the loss as Tony Stark does. But when Spider-Man dies in the new PS4 game, we feel nothing. Just start at a checkpoint and try again. So this episode makes us ask, do choose your own adventure narratives, by virtue of being able to start over, lower the stakes, and break the illusion of the story? I'm reminded of where the term Ludo Narrative Dissonance originated, in a conversation about the original Bioshock. In the game, Andrew Ryan famously tells the player,
"A man chooses, a slave obeys."
as a player, you may think you're free because you can go wherever you want on the map and shoot whenever and whatever you want. But at the end of the day, the developer is guiding you to the end, encapsulated in the character of Atlas.
Would you kindly head to Ryan's office and kill the son of a bitch?
Similarly, if you get the good ending, Stefan tells us that he was able to perfect the game by stripping out large chunks of it and only giving the players the illusion of choice. Much like the choice we're given as Netflix viewers is also just a predetermined narrative guided by Charlie Brooker. Is the game commenting on how life is a choose-your-own-adventure story where you're presented with very few curated options under the guise of being absolutely free? Maybe. Can we also read it as a critique of freedom in open-world games like Fallout, where the choices we make are largely determined by the game mechanics and the intentions of the developer? Probably. Either way, Bandersnatch, whether you like it or not, gives an amazing amount of material to think about. This vlog, along with many of our videos, was largely inspired by the discussion on our movie podcast, Show Me the Meaning. So if you want to hear more, you definitely got to check it out. We've got over 40 episodes breaking down all kinds of movies, from modern classics like The Wolf of Wall Street, The Dark Knight, Mean Girls, the whole Matrix trilogy, and Django Unchained, to film nerd favorites like Mandy, Walkabout, Videodrome, and Synecdoche, New York. So check out the links in the description to listen to Show Me the Meaning on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, etc. And as always, thanks for watching, guys. Peace.